Good morning, everyone. So this morning, I woke up early because I had the pleasure of spending breakfast with a small group of business leaders here in South Korea. And I shared with them something. I told them, I love my job. I love my job because every day I get to spend my time and energy to talk to individuals, organizations, corporates, about some of the challenges and how we can tackle some of the challenges that we see in the topic of sustainability. So in preparation for this exciting occasion today, I spent a lot of time rethinking over the past year. I had the pleasure of spending time on panels discussing sustainability topics with experts. I had a lot of opportunities spending time in universities and schools talking about sustainability to our next generation and what that means in the corporate setting. And I've reflected on some of the questions that I get asked the most. The first question I get asked is, what is the most critical item under the umbrella of sustainability that people care about the most today? And in our experience working with large corporates like yourself, we know that decarbonization and climate change is top of the sustainability agenda today. So what I'm going to do today is spend a bit more time on this. But the second question I often get is, which country is doing the best at the moment? Who is setting examples? And no matter how I look at the question, no matter what research I do, some common names always come up on top. Sweden, Norway, Finland. Sometimes you'll see Canada on the list, New Zealand. Maybe you'll come across Japan or Singapore in that. But today, I want to make a bold bet. My bold bet is South Korea could come on top of that list. And I'm even willing to make a bolder bet. I believe South Korea could become one of the most influencing forces on the global stage to drive sustainability, especially in the area of decarbonization. And let me spend some time to tell you why. First of all, as a country, you have all the hardest ingredients already in place. Led by your large corporations, some significant steps are being taken on the R&D front. For example, discussions around hydrogen technologies among your big companies continue to progress rapidly, and we're even seeing export of this technology, like hydrogen electric trucks being exported to Europe. South Korean companies are researching options for utilizing the carbon that is being captured from carbon capture and utilization facilities and looking at how to utilize that. On the consumer side, your organizations here are leading the way when it comes to refill or post-consumer packaging. Investor pressures is also mounting rapidly in this country. South Korea actually has floated a record number of bonds associated with ESG in the past year. The number of South Korean companies that have committed to the Science-Based Target Initiative didn't just double or triple, it increased 5 times in the last 2 years, more than any Asian countries. And more importantly, a third of that comes from your financial institutions. That's a signal to me that capital exists and investor pressures will only mount over time. And the third ingredient that you already have in place is related to your national development strategy. You're the 14th country to legislate the vision to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050, out of the 70 or so that have signed up in the past couple of years. But what is more incredible for me is not this 2050 carbon neutrality target. What is incredible are the short-term goals that have been established here. Your country will be investing more than $140 billion to create almost 2 million digital and green jobs by 2025. That's 2 years later. You've committed to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by almost 40% by 2030. And And you've also taken the bold commitment to shut down 30 power plants by 2034. It is very easy for any large corporate or country to say we are going to be net zero or carbon neutral by 2050, 2060, so on and so forth. But having these short-term targets in place and concrete steps to get there is really the key differentiating factor. At Schneider Electric, we have also made similar bold bets. And later on, I will share with you some of the short-term steps that we are taking to achieve our carbon ambitions. But in the meantime, I think I've made it clear that South Korea has all the right ingredients in place. But what else is unique about this country that made me make such a bold statement and bet? Why do I say South Korea could become one of the most influencing forces on the global stage to drive sustainability, especially in climate change? Well, the second reason is this. I don't believe, from what I've seen, that anybody else can on one hand lead by example, while on the other hand being very sophisticated and able to build power and influence. At Schneider Electric, we believe we're unique, because exactly that. We play on both sides of the sustainability topic. On one hand, we're trying to be role models in the way we lead sustainability in our own operations. But at the same time, as you saw earlier today, we try to be part of the solution for our customers and our external ecosystem. And when you're able to connect end-to-end what you do in sustainability in your own ecosystem and contribute it to the outside, this is what creates unique advantage in the market. So let me bring this back to South Korea, and I'm going to share with you some personal examples for that. So I spent actually my entire career not in sustainability. The big part of my early career is actually in management consulting, and I was a corporate strategist for many, many, many years. And around 12 years ago, I was working in the United Kingdom on a very strategic project, and the exam question was this. How do we create a truly sustainable urban neighborhood in London? And my project team obviously did the typical management consulting thing. We did a lot of analysis, modeling, model out scenarios, develop new business models. And one of the things that we did was we looked at around the world and say, hey, where are the best-in-class examples of sustainable urban development? And guess what? Out of the 10 case studies we shared with the board, 2 of them were based in South Korea. And when it comes to the power of influence, not only has this country been able to become a powerhouse in a mere 50 years post-war, Seoul is often recognized as one of the most powerful cities in the world. And you also have incredible soft power on the global stage. So I have 2 daughters. One is 2 years old, and one is 6 months old. And the only reason, as a mother, I can be here today with you is because there's a lady called Auntie Irma who is at home helping me look after my family. Auntie Irma is like a second mother to my children, and she takes such great care of our household. She's from the Philippines. She speaks to us in English, so she's fluent in it. She's also obviously fluent in her mother tongue, Tagalog. Guess what her 3rd fluent language is? Any takers? Korean. She can watch any Korean TV, movie with no subtitles. And the reason she's fluent, because like 100 million of people in the world, she's a fan of BTS. So last but not least, why is Julie so bold this morning? Well, I think the most important thing for me is actually your people care. Research has shown that 86% of South Koreans believe that climate change is the most major threat faced by the country and by humanity. Earlier you heard that a decarbonized future will be a world more electrical and more digital. And it will require significant evolution on the demand side. Energy users will rethink how they do things. So in the future, we're going to see decentralized microsystems where green energy or green electricity is tied to demand real-time and driven by the consumers of energy. So the fact that people here care deeply about the topic makes me believe that the demand-side evolution will accelerate in your decarbonization efforts. And this is why I was willing to make the bold statement I made today, that South Korea could become one of the most influencing forces on the global stage when it comes to tackling climate change. So what I want to explore further with you in the next 10 minutes is this. When it comes to climate change, what is the role of corporates? And how can we get on the path to net zero? I mentioned earlier today that large corporates obviously play a huge role in driving decarbonization. But I also want to acknowledge something very unique about the South Korean economy. According to business statistics, small-medium enterprises actually take up 99% of the number of enterprises here, 82% of total employment, and almost 50% of your export. So if the future is a net zero decarbonized world, what can all of us do now? In our experience, working with our customers, our ecosystem stakeholders, at Schneider Electric, we believe the fastest path to net zero requires a very integrated approach of strategize, digitize, and decarbonize. First of all, strategizing is all about one thing. It is about planning ahead how you're going to deploy the limited resources that you have on hand. That could be money, that could be time, that could be people. And how you plan that resource out for the future. In an ideal world, your net zero strategy would also be integrated and tied to your business strategy, just like what you've seen your country do in the National Development Plan. So the first thing you need to do is understand where you are and think about what the future could look like. And today, earlier, you heard about the future of electricity 4.0, but there may be other factors that are impacting your organizations in the future. Think about what your future organization and business needs to look like, and set long-term ambitions accordingly and make bold bets. But as I mentioned before, when it comes to long-term ambitions, every company can do that. The question, and when things fall apart, is how? How do you take small, near-term steps to get commitments in place? So I want to share an experience with you that we've done ourselves at Schneider Electric as a practitioner. We've set ourselves ambitious long-term targets to be net zero by 2050, carbon neutral in our value chain by 2040. But we know one thing. We know sitting here today, this looks like an impossible feat. And honestly, we probably cannot tell you exactly step by step how we're going to do that for the next 25 years. But one thing we know at Schneider is that we need to start now. So what we've done, one of the examples of what we've done to get things started, is that we know one of the hardest things for us to tackle is our upstream Scope 3 emissions. So in April 2021, we launched the Zero Carbon Project. The Zero Carbon Project involves hundreds and thousands of people across Schneider Electric, from different departments, different functions, coming together to work with our top 1,000 key suppliers to help them reduce their greenhouse gas emission by 50% by 2025. The fundamental tenets of the Zero Carbon Project is for us to start working with those suppliers very closely to quantify their GHG emissions, and we support them by doing that, giving them the tools, the skills, the functional fundamentals to do it. And we work with them to help them take ambitious emission reduction targets. We also work with them to look at what potential implementation action plans need to be put in place to achieve those targets. The participating suppliers will require to take public commitment in their reduction targets and to share their reduction progress with us. So yes, we may not know all of the answers of how to get to net zero by 2050. But we are confident in our strategy because we know that we need to progress towards this ambition and commitment, and we need to do something now. Digitization. Personally, I would say digitization and data kind of go hand in hand. On one hand, you need technologies to help you capture the data, and you heard a lot about that today. You need to identify your core processes that drive carbon emission. You need to implement digital solutions to capture that information. And ideally, it's done at the source of the emission, so that you know what emissions is happening at what time and how. On the other hand, once you have the right data captured, you need digital technologies to help you understand and visualize that data. So you can drive decision-making, you can action precisely and quickly, and shorten your time to market. Getting this level of insight is the first step to help you further develop technology pathways to net zero enablement for the next 20, 25 years, and so on and so forth. So to bring this to life a little bit more, what is digitization and data all about? So I want to share with you a case of Swire. Swire is one of the largest conglomerates here in the region, headquartered out of Hong Kong, where I'm based. They're often considered the leader in sustainability in the global stage. They actually didn't start yesterday. They started their decarbonization efforts since 2016, so almost 10 years ago. And they have a huge portfolio of businesses. They have shipping, they have energy business, they have a property business, they have an airline business called Cathay Pacific, I'm sure some of you know. They're also one of the largest Coca-Cola bottling companies in the world. Zooming into the property business alone, they have installed over 13,000 digital assets, such as sensors, in the past 8 years, across all of their assets, across all of the geographies. The digital assets, then they connected, and the data is constantly being monitored and analyzed by the systems and platforms they've installed, giving them almost real-time feedback and visibility into where emissions is coming from. And from those insights, they're able to strategically plan out replacement, optimization, and any other things they need to do in the future across all of their operations. This has helped them stay on the pathway to reduce absolute GHG emissions by 25% in 2025 and 46% by 2030. So speaking of decarbonization pathways, the last part of the integrated approach is decarbonize. And I want to share with you how corporates can take concrete actions and steps to a net zero future with 4 fundamental levers. 1, electrification. We heard about it this morning. Replacing the energy used today by directly burning fossil fuels to transforming that to electricity. Reduction, leveraging digital technologies to intelligently reduce usage. And of course, replace your brown electricity with your green electricity. So here's the problem. Doing those 3 things isn't enough. Even for the most heavy, hard-to-abide industries, by doing the first 3 levers, you're probably only going to be able to reduce 20 to 30% of your total emissions. And it is even much less for service industries, etc. So a big part of a company's emission doesn't actually come from the energy they use in their own operations, but from the energy that is consumed in all other parts of the value chain and activities, and the use of the end products. which is why the last part here is the most critical of all, which is how do you engage your company's value chain in your decarbonization efforts? So I share with you a quick example. In COP26, Schneider Electric, alongside 10 of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the world, like GSK, Johnson & Johnson, Pfizer, Sanofi, et cetera, we came together and we recognized that there is actually a common supply chain amongst the pharmaceutical and healthcare industry players, and that there is power and scale if they partner together to look at how to decarbonize their collective supply chain. So Schneider Electric helped these 10 pharmaceutical companies put a program together to help them take actions to reduce their Scope 2 emissions of their supply chain and their suppliers. The Energize program is a great example of how to drive system-level change and bring suppliers who may not otherwise themselves have the internal resource and expertise available on their decarbonization journey. So as I said, I do believe South Korea could and has the potential to become one of the most influencing forces on the global stage to tackle climate change. And hopefully some of the techniques I shared with you here today will help you visualize the role that you can play to make it happen. So I'm going to leave you with this. If not now, when? And if not you, who? Thank you.